So what is the Freehold Area Health Department doing with the podcast? We want to share with you the amazing work that local health departments do while sharing some of the outrageous true stories regarding the antics of our daily work. We're changing up the host, the guests, and the topics because we want to keep it fun and interesting. Let's learn what Freehold Area Health Department does.
Hello, and welcome to What the Health, a podcast by the Freehold Area Health Department. I'm Christa Moor, the public health nurse here at the Freehold Area Health Department, and today's episode is seafood, shellfish, and sushi. Oh my, it's quite the tongue-tangler. So today we're talking all things seafood and shellfish, foods that I absolutely love. So I'm a little nervous for this episode, but we have two awesome guests with us who are going to walk us through all the important information. So we are joined today by our Assistant Health Officer and Epidemiologist, Nance. Hi, Brett.
How are you? Hello.
And our Principal Registered Environmental Health Specialist, Margaret Karl. Hi, Maggie.
Hello, all.
Thank you both for coming today. I know you're very busy, so we're really excited for this episode. So our listeners may have noticed that a lot of our episodes revolve around food safety, and that's because public health plays such a huge role when it comes to food safety. But we're specifically calling out the seafood and the shellfish today, and I'm wondering why they are worthy of their own episode. So Maggie, do you want to share with us why we're doing this episode?
Sure. So seafish, shellfish, sushi, they're all pretty regulated when you talk about food safety. Shellfish, there's a tag they have to keep, they have to show it to us. It kind of is a history of where it came from to you eating it. Sushi, they have to have parasite destruction letters to make sure that, I hate to say it, all sushi fish has parasites. You freeze them, they die. Make sure we don't eat them. And seafood's a little bit easier. There's really no regulation as far as regular fish goes, unless it's sushi grade. But you still need a proper source. A restaurant just can't go out and, a fish off the dock in the back and feed it to you.
Hopefully not.
Hopefully that's not happening. I have not personally seen that.
Good. Okay.
Hopefully it's not happening. Why we care about it. There's a lot of things in the ocean that make us sick. Shellfish in general are filter feeders. Everything that they intake stays in them. So everything that you eat, we want to make sure is safe. So that is kind of...
All right. So a little bit of like a riskier food, a little bit more like monitoring and following along that we have to do to ensure people are safe when they eat it.
That is correct.
And you kind of started to allude to it, but Brett, I know Maggie mentioned like the shellfish especially.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else you want to say about shellfish and why we kind of called them out on their own?
Yeah, so I think it's important to note that like overall there are considerations that people need to take whether you're consuming fish or shellfish, things like making sure that you're putting your fish or shellfish on ice or in the refrigerator within like 2 hours of purchasing it or buying it, making sure that you're separating any like raw or thawed fish or shellfish from ready-to-eat foods to prevent cross-contamination. So we certainly don't want like the juice from the clams that you're about to steam prepped on the same cutting board as the nice romaine lettuce that you're about to chop to feed your family for the salad for dinner.
Good tip. That's a good tip.
Ensuring that your seafood or shellfish is cooked to 145 degrees internal temperature. That being said, fish and shellfish like oysters, clams, mussels can pose some additional risk factors to people. Shellfish could be harvested from water that could be that can naturally contain bacteria that can make people sick, or that water could be contaminated by bacteria, parasites, or viruses from the poop of either people or animals. I feel like whenever I wind up presenting or talking, poop somehow gets into the conversation with being an epidemiologist.
It's a big part of what we do.
It really is. Shellfish can also be contaminated by people that are sick and ill food handlers. So if the shellfish in any of these circumstances, whether they are prepped by an ill food handler or harvested from contaminated water, if they are consumed raw, which I know is a very popular thing. Some people love their oyster shooters, you included. Or if they are undercooked, so that could be like if you notice like the shell doesn't open up completely after you've steamed them or cooked them, people can be sick or can become sick from those contaminants. So that's why we pay a little bit more attention to shellfish.
All right, I'm getting like a little nervous, but I'm still not turned off of seafood and shellfish yet. So let's talk a little bit more. We'll see where I am at the end of this episode. Okay, so now we know kind of like what we're nervous about and what we have to think about. Maggie, do you want to take us through when you go into an establishment that's selling or serving, especially raw shellfish or seafood? Like, what is your team looking for to make sure that, like, if I go eat there, I'm not getting sick afterwards?
Okay, so let's take a regular supermarket, for example, first. Some of them do sell clams, oysters, mussels. When you buy them, you want to make sure they're on ice. If they are not on ice, it means they're not held at proper temperature, and you should probably call the health department and let them know, like, hey, they're not icing this, because that's a big no-no
on the screen right now.
Yeah, it's something we want you to call us about.
As far as sushi goes, sushi is interesting because of the rice as well as the raw fish used. So the raw fish in sushi must have a parasite destruction letter, which is part of their HACCP plan. HACCP is Hazard Analysis Critical Control Analysis. So what you're looking at is what the hazard is and your control of how to handle that. With sushi, the rice in general has to have a pH lower than 4.6. When they make sushi, sometimes the rice gets more room temperature. So in order to make sure that bacteria doesn't grow in that rice, they acidify it. And they're supposed to keep a log of their acidifying process and what the pH level is. So sometimes we go in and they don't even have a log. Sometimes they have a log and we ask them, please demonstrate your pH process. And it has no batteries. They don't know how to work it. So obviously the log is fake. So, at that point we put them on conditional and be like, hey, get your act together, because this is not okay. So that's a lot of what we look for. In a restaurant selling shellfish, we look for shellfish tags, and those tags actually show where it's harvested.
It basically shows like the whole storyline of like where that shellfish was harvested to when it got to
when it got
Gotcha.
there. Yeah. So they need to keep that for 90 days. 90 days is, it can have a lot of things, but the longest is hepatitis A. So that's where the 90 days comes in. And I know, Brett, you can probably tell us a little more about that. So that's what we're looking for. We want to make sure that, from source to your plate, that it's safe, that it's been handled safe, in a nutshell.
Cool. So that's really interesting. When I think of sushi, I would always be nervous more about the raw fish part. I never really would think about the rice, but learning today that that's something that also has to be like really closely monitored. And maybe if you get sick afterwards, it wasn't the fish, it could have been the rice too.
That is true. Very true.
Bacillus cereus and Staph aureus can make you very sick if,
True.
the rice is growing that.
All right. Any other like really crazy or weird things you've seen when you've been out on inspections related to seafood?
Oh boy. I've seen clams and mussels where the ice has melted.
So just saying in a pool of like lukewarm water.
And no, it's not even in water. It just drains in and there's no ice.
Perfect.
Yeah. Yeah, and at that point, you're like, okay, you have to pull those, get them in the back. You know, you have to put ice, like, you have to know the time. It's all about time, too. So, you know, if I see the ice is there and it's just a little low, okay, it's probably still okay. You need to add more ice right now.
Okay.
And like I said, you know, the logs and the pH meters, like, that's just ridiculous. I mean, all these people go through food handler classes, and there's no reason why you should do that unless you're just lazy and you don't care about what has to run.
Hey, I'm so curious. What did they say when they showed you their beautiful log with all of their information? And then you're like, okay, cool, let's do one. And the thing doesn't have a battery in it. Like, were they just like, oops, oopsie?
They're like, oh, it just died. I'm like, yeah, I don't think so.
That would be a thing.
Don't think so. Especially since you don't even know how to use it, right? So
Even better.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
it's bad sometimes.
Maggie,
Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah.
When you find that something is like out of compliance, do you ever have to have a restaurant like destroy that food product? Or what does it mean for our listeners when you put someone on conditional, and what happens then?
So if you put someone on conditional, that means one or more of your retail practices in specifically handling food has gone wrong. Whether it's temperature, not wearing gloves, gosh, it could be anything.
Like a major food handling.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. Like, you're going to get somebody sick, potentially.
Okay.
You're on conditional. With sushi and SHELLFISH in particular, you're really looking for that log. You're looking for the pH for the sushi rice. You're looking for shellfish tags. You're looking for a HACCP plan. You know, all these things have to be in place. And that ensures that I know what I'm doing and you know what you're doing. And together, we're making sure the public is safe.
That's what it's all about.
Yes.
And is there a way for me to know if a restaurant I go to is on a conditional status?
That is a great question. So many of you may not know. When you walk into a restaurant, you should see a satisfactory posting. Every health department looks a little bit different, but they will all say the same thing. Either satisfactory, conditional satisfactory, or unsatisfactory. Unsatisfactory, they shouldn't be open. Conditional satisfactory means, okay, you're on conditional, you're in the process of improving whatever you did wrong, and you will be, and whatever was wrong, you have temporarily bypassed it. Or, you know, you're not using a refrigerator, or, you know, we made you throw your shellfish away because it was out of temperature, or the shellfish tags were not connected to the bag. I didn't tell you guys that part. So, when a store buys shellfish from anywhere, you know, either a wholesale dealer or a fish market, those shellfish has to have a shellfish tag. That tag has to stay on the bag until the bag is empty. And I can't tell you how many times they just empty the bags, like, you know, multiple bags in a drawer, you know, a refrigerated drawer, and just let it go. And you can't do that because you need that shellfish tag. What if they were harvested in 2 different places? Now you've mixed them. And if someone gets sick, it's going to be harder to go back to that point, whether it's the ocean where it came from, bay, whatever, or the distributor, or the retailer. You know, it can go wrong in any of those places. So that shellfish tag has all the information that the health department, state health department, needs to follow it back. So I would say that's probably, you know, one of the most important things we look for is shellfish tags.
Gotcha. So we have a problem. That is our piece of information that's helping us figure out where did this come from, and do we maybe have a bigger problem we need to look into as well.
Exactly.
let's talk a little bit more about like the home setting. So if I'm having like a barbecue at my house this weekend and I'm serving the oysters and the clams and all the things that I love to eat, what do I do so I don't kill my guests? How do I keep that stuff safe? Because obviously the health department isn't coming to inspect my barbecue, but I still don't want anybody to get sick from me. So any like good tips for us as we're in this summer barbecue season?
Well, I'll start by saying you kind of do have an in with the health department. So if you needed a little home inspection, I'm sure someone will come out.
Phone a friend.
Yeah, you could phone a friend for a small price of maybe a dinner.
Well, depending on how I'm doing it, you might not want my dinner.
So Maggie, you're the food expert here, so you can feel free to jump in. But I feel like I'll just kind of reiterate some of the things that I mentioned before, making sure that you're cooking your food to appropriate internal temperatures. Usually like your probe will have like your nifty little guide onto what needs to be at what temperature. I still use that. Making sure that any like raw shellfish is like on ice, or that if you're cooking something that it's being put into the refrigerator after purchasing it before it's going to be prepped. Making sure that you're practicing hand hygiene in between handling any type of shellfish or fish in any produce or ready to eat foods. Keeping your environment clean while you're prepping, and then making sure that you're separating that raw food versus any like veggies or produce or ready to eat foods to avoid any cross-contamination. Making sure that you're using like different knives to chop or cut whatever you need to as well. Anything from your end?
Yeah, I would definitely add, there is a 4-hour window where normally food would go bad and you don't want to eat it after that 4-hour period that's been out of temperature, which means higher than 41 or lower than 145. Cold should be kept at 41 or below, hot 135 or above. You put out a platter of oysters or, shrimp or whatever. If it's sitting out there all day, you have to throw it away. 4 hours, and that's it.
Got it.
And even then, if it's really hot, with some of that seafood, I wouldn't even keep it on ice. Keep it on ice.
And not seafood related, but if you're serving macaroni or potato salad,
that's what I think about.
That's the textbook outbreak
that you're at. Yeah, where that like thing of potato salad has been sitting in the sun like all day, like it's changing color. It's got like a film.
It's starting to harden.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the day, they put out container. Oh, everybody takes some leftovers. Yeah, no.
Take some foodborne illness.
Yeah.
With you.
All right, 4 hours though. In general, that's a good tip. And if it's hot, maybe even a little less than that. Good to know. Okay. So before we wrap up, I want to talk about like an actual example of a situation that you both investigated recently. Because a lot of times the public doesn't get to hear about this stuff. That's kind of like the cool but frustrating thing about public health. We're in the background a lot. And if you don't get sick, that's our success story. So you don't even know we did something. But we did have a pretty interesting situation recently that started with a few people who were sick, and it led to an investigation of some suspect mussels, and then it led to, I believe, an international advisory. So do you want to tell us about that and how it started and where it ended and what happened?
I guess I'll start.
Yeah.
So we got a complaint. A family had eaten dinner at a local restaurant. They ordered the mussels. Only, I think, 3 people ate the mussels out of 6. Those 3 people all got sick. So they called us, and we went out to do an inspection. What the inspection found was they did not have adequate shellfish tags on hand to show us. It turns out they did have them. And so at that point, we kind of step it up. We get a copy of the shellfish tags, and we talk to our epidemiologist who can take it from there.
Yeah. So one way that we get kind of foodborne illness reports is through complaints like that. And we are always thankful when the public calls if they indicate that they have an illness, especially when it comes to shellfish. And when we get complaints like this, we take it very seriously. And we always do some fact checking. So going back to the dining partners that eat together, confirming what they ate, what they didn't eat. And it kind of revealed that that mussel dish was the only shared food item between the 3 individuals that got sick. So at this point, you know, when it comes to shellfish, we wanted to bump it up to kind of that next level. Maggie went out and did the inspection, which is a usual kind of plan of action when we receive a complaint like this. A inspector will always go out and check out the kitchen. But we decided that this required a little bit more of an elevation up to our state health department partners. So we bumped up the complaint and kind of the situation summary to our partners at the New Jersey Department of Health Communicable Disease Service, particularly kind of like the foodborne subject matter experts, as well as some folks at the SHELLFISH program at the state Public Health and Food Protection program. From there, they actually got some of their FDA partners involved. It was a lot of back and forth between the state FDA and our local health department to gather some of that shellfish tag information, which allowed them to kind of trace back where those mussels came from. And FDA actually wound up issuing a advisory to restaurants and food retailers to not serve or sell and to dispose of mussels that came from that specific lot or harvest or whatever it was, and for consumers to not eat those mussels as well. And because the mussels were harvested from Canada, it kind of had some international involvement, if you will. So really cool kind of local win that something like that came out of a very kind of small local outbreak that happened in our community.
Wow.
And it's kind of interesting. You know, we wouldn't always bump it up, but the people who actually complained said, you know, they were all open, they were cooked, you know, they had the shellfish tags. And when we went into the investigation, you know, the holding temperature was good. So that's why we bumped it up, because we didn't find anything.
So the restaurant was doing what they were supposed to be doing.
As far as we could see, yes.
Gotcha. So that was what kind of tipped you off, that we have a bigger problem here that we need to look into. Wow.
Also just noting that like the state health department does have that entire shellfish program, right? So like they have the experts there, that we kind of knew that it had to be most likely a mussel related situation, because that was the only shared food item between all of the diners. That the state has this team of experts that's their sole job, and that it would be appropriate to kind of involve them and loop them in. If it didn't have to go anywhere, okay, but you know, we made an effort to make sure that our state partners were notified and involved.
Wow. Very cool. Thank you for sharing that. So interesting how it started so local with just a few sick residents, and it went to the state and to the FDA and then to Canada of all places. So that's really cool. Thanks for sharing that story. Anything else before we wrap it up that you want to share with our audience today about seafood, shellfish, and sushi online?
Enjoy safely over the summer.
Yeah. I'm still going to. Maybe no mussels for a while.
On ice, 4 hours.
Good takeaways. If you remember nothing else, on ice 4 hours.
And always wash your hands.
Always wash your hands. Yes. Poop and washing hands. Some things we love to talk about in public health all the time. Well, Brett and Maggie, thank you so much for joining us today. I know I learned a lot. I hope everybody else did as well. And we hope to see you for future episodes.
You know where to find us.
Put that phone number again.
It was very fun. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.